I'm on a quiet road here in the town of Bellush. Why? Because this is the Rua de Anta. And Anta is a prehistoric megalithic tomb. Let's find out about it. The Anta de Pedra dos Muros is in the Lisbon Peninsula between Sintra and Lisbon. It's in the municipality of Sintra, just outside the town of Bellush. The Anta is located in the Quinta do Senhor da Serra, from which it gets its second name. This is the farm or the estate of the Lord of the Mountains, referring more to God than to the Marques de Bellush, who owns this quinta. I'm standing outside the Quinta do Senhor da Serra, which is the farm on which the Anta is located. It's closed. It's up for sale. If I had millions of euros, I could buy it. It is available for booking for events like weddings and things like that, and I've contacted them to ask permission to come and visit the Anta, and I haven't been given it. So I'm not going to be able to visit it in person. So on this map, you can see this is the gate where I was standing, and you can see some of the estate buildings, but this whole bordered area is part of the estate. The Anta is over at this end. So if we go over to the Rua do Anta opposite, we might be able to get a view of it. These houses here on my left were built in the last few decades overlooking the Quinta de Senhor da Serra, which is where the Anta is located. So all of these houses have a front row view overlooking the Anta. They do make it hard for us to see it though. At the end of the row of houses, you can see that there's a fence and not a lot next to it. This is the back gate of the quinta. It's locked, it's chained shut, and there's a wall here that goes around the quinta. You can see there's a gap in the wall, and it would be possible to climb over and enter the quinta without permission. And I've seen evidence that other people have done it. I'm not going to. I feel that I'm going to respect their property rights, but I'm going to see if we can get a shot of the Anta another way. I tried flying my drone over the quinta to get some view of the Anta, but every time it got very close to the Anta, it lost connection and returned home. There's a large cell tower there, and I think that was interfering with the connection. So I'm going to have to finish this video using other people's materials from here in my home studio. A good starting point is this out-of-print archaeological guidebook for the Lisbon area that was published in the 1980s by the Portuguese Department of Cultural Heritage. And there's a page with information about the Anta and a photo showing what it looked like back in 1986. To really learn the details about the Anta, we need to go back to the beginning when it was first investigated by one of the earliest Portuguese archaeologists, Carlos Ribeiro, in the 1800s. And he first identified it in about 1850, but this was so early on in archaeology here in Portugal that he wasn't even sure that this was a dolmen. He thought it was some rocky outcrop. But he then got permission from Marques de Bellush to investigate the Anta, and he did so in the 1870s, along with the other two Antas de Bellush, the Anta de Monte Brau and Anta de Estria. He found this Anta in the least intact state. He only really found two upright orthostats, or in Portuguese they're called estaios, and then one other that was broken. In his book he published talking about the Antas de Bellush. He included some designs of the Anta de Pedra dos Muros, showing the way it looked at that time. You can see that the biggest of the two
estaios or orthostats, is huge. It's about 5 meters tall by nearly 4 meters across. He diagrammed the chamber, although there's some disagreement between him and other later archaeologists about exactly the shape of it, but it definitely was a polygonal chamber with, presumably there was a corridor, but there was no evidence found of it. As he was excavated, he was told by locals that the dolmen had been looted about a decade earlier, and he found very little artifacts. What he did find, along with the architecture of the dolmen, allows archaeologists to place this in the late Chalcolithic period, about 5,000 years ago. Amongst the artifacts he found included a Portuguese coin from the 1700s, so obviously this place was known and visited by people in the area for quite some time. As a matter of fact, there's photos showing that this was a pilgrimage site for people in the area who used to come and have parties on the dolmen. And apparently one of the myths was that if women slid down that huge stone, it would improve their fertility and they would be able to give their husbands lots of children, which was important back then. Eventually, the owner of the land had to stop those pilgrimages in the early 1900s. The Anta was later excavated again in the 1930s and the 1950s by the Leisners, who were a famous German couple who did a lot of archaeology in Portugal at that time. And photographs from that area that have been published in recent research papers show that in the 1930s, these stones were more or less in this position that they were when Ribeiro found them in the 1800s. But by the 1950s, the second one, which had been supporting the large stone, had fallen over. And so it was really just the biggest stone standing on its own. Archaeologist Antonio Carlos Silva, in his own blog post, has posted this photograph from the 1970s from his own collection, which shows that the houses were starting to be built up along that Rua do Anta. But then in 2010, reports came out that the Anta had been destroyed. Police were called out to investigate this crime against the national heritage, but they didn't find any evidence of vandalism, and they figured it would have taken enormous force for any individuals to destroy the stone. What they figured was at the time the A16 motorway was being constructed, and they figured that explosions from that construction had shattered the stone. In the aftermath, people visited the site and took photographs showing the final destruction of this Anta. As I said, I wasn't given permission to visit this Anta, so I'm using other people's resources to present this information to you. Links to all of these sites and resources are available on my website, prehistoricportugal.com. The link is in the comments below. Perhaps the best resource to explore the Anta virtually is a 3D model published on Sketchfab by Luis Camara, and you can see here that he's not only included photos of the destroyed Anta, but also historical photos from the earliest days. It was disappointing not to be able to visit this Anta personally, but the fact that it's in such a state of destruction, I'm not that worried about it. It does bring to light two of the realities of exploring prehistoric sites here in Portugal and anywhere. The first is that a lot of these sites are located on private property, and sometimes it's possible to visit them if people have given permission or leave their property open, but sometimes it's not. And this is a case here in Portugal and around the world. The second is the destruction or damage to these sites that can happen intentionally or accidentally. In this case, it was through construction. Certainly many sites in Portugal have been destroyed or damaged by agricultural work currently as well as historically throughout the years. And while we can and should be upset about the loss of cultural heritage here and around the world, we also have to recognize that this is kind of normal and has been going on for thousands of years. These sites have lasted for many, many years, and many of them will continue to last, especially if we try to protect them all. But we're never going to be able to preserve all of them, especially in situ. Finally, I feel it's important to present this information about the Anta de Pedro dos Moros because it is the third of these three Antas de Belas that were collectively declared a national monument in 1910. And if you look at a map, you can see that the three Antas de Belas are very close together. They're basically within sight of each other. But they're also connected to other similar prehistoric sites in the area. The Anta de Gualva, which I visited already in another video, is just a couple of kilometers away. In a very short distance, the other side, there is the megalithic monument of Pego Longo, which is not an Anta, but a constructed megalithic tomb. And just beyond that is a series of artificial caves in an area called Carenc, which were created during the Neolithic era to carve into the stone to create funerary monuments, which later became surpassed by Antas. All of these are just a few short kilometers away from each other, which leads us to conclude that this was a significant area during prehistoric times for ceremonial rites as well as for people to live in. I hope you've enjoyed this virtual visit to the Anta de Pedro dos Moros. If you want to know more about it, do check out the link down below. I've got links to all the resources and the sites here, as well as more details about the Anta on my website, prehistoricportugal.com. And please do give me a like and subscribe to this channel. I'm going to be visiting lots more sites all around the country. Thanks for watching.